You ever wonder sometimes why the simplest crap can make such a huge difference? Oh, yes, it can. Used to give archery lessons, yes. I even still have my own shooting range. It's not many acres, it's only like 7 acres. Um, Same thing applies to photography. You see this little button right here called the shutter release? uh, I picked up another D3, by the way. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, but I couldn't pass it up for $600. Boy, was it dirty. It took me 3 hours to clean this girl today. I mean, she was one dirty girl. Then I got this camera in the mail. It was slutty. Like slutty dirty. God almighty. There was like fuzzballs inside the light box. It's only got 220,000 clicks on it. Yeah, only, right? Anyway, everybody is using their shutter release wrong. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. What about handheld low light? Okay. No vibration reduction on the lens, no vibration reduction on the camera. Even if there is, what if you could slightly change the way you release your shutter? And it would make a world of difference. I've got unique techniques for hand holding the lens with the least number of contact points. Same thing applies in archery too. You wonder how some of these professional archers, they have a divot in their face. The reason they have a divot in their face is because that is their nocking or reference point that they actually draw the bow back to each and every time. It's about arc, absolute repeatable consistency. This is also about consistency, but it's also about changing the way you shoot. And let me actually show you hand motion. Okay, let me show you this. Okay, when you actually press the shutter release, your hand automatically flexes in, and you're doing this number with the camera, okay? When you press the shutter release button down, take a look at the camera really subtly, okay? Let's see if you could spot it, okay? This is me pressing. I'm going to exaggerate it some so you can actually see it better. This is the typical shutter release. The whole hand is crimping up. I'm going to press the shutter down. Now I'm going to change something. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm not going to move my finger, but I'm going to have the motion as if I were moving my finger. Now let's see, and actually I can't exaggerate this because it's so steady. Let me show you another way to release the shutter. You see the movement of this compared to this? You actually either have this number or you have that number. It depends on the shooter. You see that motion? Now let's go back to the new way of shooting. The only thing I've actually changed, and most people shoot this way, is they press the shutter release button in. Okay? The same thing that any master shooter, IPSC shooter, international pistol shooting competition shooters, or expert snipers will tell you is that you don't actually pull the trigger. Okay, you actually press it, or you actually draw through the trigger. There are actually several different ways people say it, but the one thing that everybody makes a mistake on the shutter release of a camera is the same thing that novice shooters make, both in archery and also in shooting with firearms, is that they actually think that that button, like the trigger, is something to be pulled or pressed. And that's kind of true, but is that the very best methodology for the steadiest release of your shutter? Because at the very last second, when your hand is doing this number, and this is what your hand does, it flinches the entire camera off and you end up with a slightly less than sharp picture. I don't care how sharp the camera is, or even if you have VR. Every little bit helps, but especially in lower light or slower shutter speeds. So you change from this number to this number, but you're not actually moving your finger, you're just drawing your finger in, but you're not doing this every time, so your finger actually remains in place due to the friction of your finger and the shutter release. So your finger isn't actually moving like this, but you're actually drawing it in like that. And when you do that, what you do, ha 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 ha, this is the key point of this video, pay attention, you isolate your index finger muscle from your hands. And doing this number, you isolate that muscle. But when you press the shutter release button in, the natural proclivity of the human muscles in the human hand, when you actually press the shutter button down, is you engage the entire hand. And what that does is it takes your camera, depending on how you actually do it, you'll shift it this way or you'll shift it that way. This works. It's undeniable and irrefutable. Other people that I've told this to is like, just try it for 5 minutes, okay? Go outside, find some sort of low light stuff, shoot the way you normally do by pressing that damn shutter release button in, and then, okay, take 5 minutes of your time to verify that it works. And now change it from this to this. But you're not actually moving your finger. You're just telling your brain to tell your finger to draw in. But due to the friction between your finger and the shutter release, it doesn't actually move, so you don't actually have to, each time you don't actually have to stick your finger back out again and start again. And you'll see that it does work. I absolutely bleeping guarantee it. Promise it. It will give you steadier shots. Period. If I'm lying, I'm dying. Okay? Now, if you're shooting like at up 200, 1/200th of a second or something with VR on the lens, and you try it and you go like, I don't see any difference. That's because it was steady enough to begin with, okay? You're going to have to either pixel peep on that. I'm talking about like at lower light, slower shutter speeds. It is much more obvious. It is even obvious with VR and at higher shutter speeds, but it's not obvious until you stick both images side by side and you blow them way the hell up and you start pixel peeping them. And then you will see it. So, try it, you know? It does work. It does. Okay? Thank you for watching. Bye. You like this Nikon D3, huh? $600. Isn't that sweet? You know how much this camera used to cost? Do you? Do you know how much this camera used to cost? Do you? Now $600? Wow. The parts on this thing alone, just the parts. Okay? If I were to stab the sensor with a screwdriver, I could still harvest this thing for more than $600 in parts. The chassis alone is a gem. If I were to like sandblast this chassis after removing all the parts, it would look like a piece of Tiffany jewelry. It is gorgeous. One day I'm going to get a totally dead Nikon D3. You know that I'm going to strip apart and do that to it, but the last dead, this is so funny, and I made a video about it. The last dead Nikon D3 I got it for $50, which is stupid. But the reason that I was going to strip it apart and sandblast it for its chassis to make a piece of artwork, yeah. The only problem is the Nikon D3 is so bleeping tough that camera was not actually dead. It was perfectly fine. It just had a little cracked screen back here, which I fixed. It was really dirty. It was a dirty girl. I cleaned it up. It's working fine. And my dad uses it now. Now it's his favorite camera. It's like it's the camera that doesn't die. It's the immortal camera. Everything can die. There's a lot of electronics in this thing. They can and do die, so that's not entirely true, but it's kind of mostly true. But $600. But boy, was this camera slutty when I got it out of the box today. I mean, like, damn, who treats their camera like that? This is the one camera that could take it. This was one slutty, dirty camera. It took me hours to clean this camera up. Clean the sensor, clean this. There was dirt in every corner. It's like you were just like push somebody's nose down in the mud where you get every orifice full of dirt. That's what this camera looked like before I cleaned it up. Now it is beautiful. Camera lust. Camera porn. Camera porn. Yeah, not totally crazy. No. Not yet anyway.